Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Meredith Lego, and I'm doing a series of videos on Ascension science. Today, I thought I would do something a little bit different than what my normal approach has been, which has been to share teachings or downloads that I've received from beings in sort of extra dimensional planes that are offering some insights about the ascension process and the mechanics of ascension. Tonight, I thought I would share some different types of methods that you can receive downloads, if you will, of data or streams of information that comes in from the field. There can be, I'm sure, many other types of download processes than the ones that I'll be sharing today, but these are the ones that I've personally experienced, so I can offer some perspective on that. So basically, there are 5 different types of downloads that I'm aware of that I have experienced. So the first one is when you receive an inspiration of a thought or an idea. And this, in fact, is likely the most common type, and most likely you have experienced this as well. So this would be an example of, let's say, being, just driving on the road or being in the shower or talking with somebody, and all of a sudden you get a flash or an inspiration of a sudden idea that comes into your head. So that's usually how it happens for me. I'm just kind of thinking about an issue, and all of a sudden I get a sudden flash of an idea. Like I said, that's the most common type of download, I think. And what you may not think about it, but in this particular case, you're actually drawing in or magnetically drawing in information from the unified field or the quantum field. And you're doing it at a time where your vibrational, or your frequency, I should say, is vibrating at a certain frequency rate, and you're essentially drawing in the information that matches that frequency. So you have an intention, although you may not know it, you've got an intention that you're sort of pondering about, and you're essentially magnetically finding out there in the field the type of information or data that matches that frequency, in a sense, kind of turning on the codes to download that into your field. And that's essentially what happens. And so because we exist in a quantum holographic reality, all information, all data is already in the field, irregardless of time and space. It already exists as a concept or a construct within the field. Even stuff that's well into the future, as well as stuff that has already happened. So all inventions are already known in the field, and the blueprint for their reality already exists in a field. We are in a fractalized holographic universe, if you will. So oftentimes when you are thinking about a problem, let's say that you're trying to solve for, the answer already exists out there, but your etheric body, if you will, is sort of operating at the right frequency, as I mentioned before, to magnetically draw that in. And that magnetic process is that feminine or magnetic property that's existing within your field. So as opposed to electrical, where you're pushing information out, magnetic is drawing the information in. And just as an aside, that's why it's really important, if you're an innovator, to actually act upon those ideas. Because once an idea has been conceived of, especially a little bit more, you get an inspiration of a thought, you start to think about the framework behind that idea a little bit more, you're actually putting that information out into the field, and others can download it just as you can, because the codes have been turned on for that information to now be accessible to others in the field, and essentially can also be acted upon by them if they're quicker about it. So that is essentially what's called the 100th monkey effect that is going into effect. And I'm not here to talk about the 100th monkey effect, but if you have time, I would encourage you to do research on how they figured that out. So that's essentially what happens. The second form of download that I've experienced is telepathic knowing. Now, another term for that can be claircognizance. But that's essentially when you're pulling information in from the field that you just know to be true absolutely in your core. So sometimes this can happen. So what's essentially happening is that within our electromagnetic field, and as it's starting to connect into the body, you've essentially got telepathic kind of portal points that are called chakras. And they can work in your favor to actually help give you information well before you physically or your senses are cognizant of it, if you will. But this usually most likely takes the form of, let's say you're thinking about somebody and next thing you know, they're calling you on the phone. That tends to happen more often. Or you're thinking about a particular topic and you happen to be with others at the table or in the room, and then like 2 minutes later or a minute later, somebody brings up the topic that you were literally just thinking about, and you're like, wow, I was just thinking about that. So that's another example where you are basically with those individuals acting at the same frequency rate, and you're passing information between each other, even though you're not having a verbal conversation. So that's more of sort of a telepathic transference of data that's going on between your electromagnetic fields, and you're essentially pulling that into yourself. So that could be telepathic communication. I kind of call it telepathic knowing, just because I sort of know, I know somebody's about to call, or, I'm thinking about this. And now I've gotten to the point, especially with my daughters, where I'm thinking about something and I know that one of them is picking it up, and I know she's going to bring it up within a minute or two. And it's been happening more and more and more and more this last year. So, we're getting much more wired telepathically to start to transfer data that way. Although, it's not like I hear her voice in my head yet, but I know that we're passing information back and forth. And she also does that with her twin sister. Another kind of example of this would be, I've gotten good at knowing what the end of a television show is going to be. 5 minutes into the show. So let's say there's like an hour sitcom where it's Law and Order or a murder mystery or a NCIS or a CSI or something like that. Usually within 5 minutes, I kind of know who did it. Even though I obviously don't know the preview of the story, but there's enough people who participated in developing the script, producing the script, and there's probably been enough people out there in society who've watched it that the ending is already out there in the field, and I'm pulling it in, and it's so obvious to me what the ending is going to be. And usually I get it right 90% of the time within the first 5 minutes. The third type of download situation that I've experienced has been what I call telepathic pushes of data. So this would be when I'm experiencing, and it usually happens when I'm in meditation, but I'll be sitting there in meditation and not necessarily thinking about anything. So it's not like I'm intending information to come to me because I'm thinking about it, but I'm just sitting there actually trying to empty my mind. And all of a sudden I'll feel a huge buildup of pressure within my head, almost like, not quite like a headache pressure, but it's like a huge pressure, almost like you have a sinus cold or something coming on. And it builds up and it builds up and it gets more intense and more pressurized. And all of a sudden there's a bit of a pop, almost like the pressure relieves. And in that moment, I will experience a multidimensional sensory experience of information that's passed on. And it usually includes words, visuals. Sometimes it can include senses on your body, like almost like you could feel electrical currents go by. And it sometimes can include smells as well. So it's kind of like a multi-sensory experience of information that's being sent to me. And one thing I've studied enough about telepathic communication on how to do it is that If you're essentially thinking about sending a message to somebody else and you don't already have a strong connection with that person, like let's say a family member or a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend or something like that, let's say you're trying to send some information, what you would do is essentially imagine that you've got a cord, if you will, going between your pineal gland and their pineal gland. So you almost like, if you got to go back to the day of the telephone game where you've got two cans that are connected through a string and you're kind of listening through the string, only the cans are your pineal glands and you're imagining a cord that's going in between them. So when you're trying to send a message, you think of the message and you almost imagine the message as an information packet, essentially traveling like in a little bubble, going through this string. And it's almost like watching food go through a snake, where you see, a string, but as this information packet is a larger bubble, it's kind of moving along the string. And then you see it hitting that person's head. And then usually when I experience trying to push a message, I will get a buildup of pressure in my head. And then when the message hits their head, I get a pop or a release of energy within my head, and I know that they've received it. Now, whether they're comprehending what the message is and tuning into it is something different, but I know that the data has gotten to their pineal gland. And so because of that understanding of how it works, I realize that this is somebody sending me a message. So, I don't know necessarily of the consciousness, ascension level of the being that's usually sending this message. But when I get these types of messages, like I said, it'll be a buildup of pressure. It'll hit me and then it'll pop, almost like a burst of pressure in your head. And then you get overwhelmed with different types of data. My experience is that when it happens, it's usually a very smaller data set. It's not like minutes and minutes and minutes. It's usually like less than 30 seconds of information that comes in. Usually it's even less, like 5 to 10 seconds. It might be like 5 words, an image, and something else that goes along with that. So this is somebody who, probably like me, just is less experienced in sending through information. So that's the third experience that I've had. The fourth experience has been what I am going to call telepathic stream of data. And it really has been data. So this is what I would consider to be a true download of data. And it's happened to me only a few times, like maybe 3 or 4 times. But in these particular cases, I've almost felt like, and the only way I can describe it is like, I'm a computer and I'm getting transferred data from a USB file. That's the only way I can describe it. When this has happened, I've received data coming in. So it can be in the form of math equations or geometries, and it's not just like a math equation. It's like overlapping streams of data that's coming in. It's almost like you're getting a zip drive that has 50 files in it, yet you're comprehending and making out the unique stream of each data file. So it could be like you've received 50 Word documents, yet you're able to somewhat interpret the meaning behind each Word document. Now, when I received the one on equations and geometries, I didn't necessarily understand what they meant because they were pretty complex, and my ego personality construct was enough attuned to realize I'm receiving some complex data. I have no idea what this means, but it's coming in, and I'm sure it'll be processed by some aspect of my multidimensional self at some point in the future. Another example of that, which I have been able to interpret a little bit more, is I have received like 2 or 3 minutes straight of constant streaming data of audio files. It seems like audio files. And so in this particular case, it would be like receiving 50 to 100 different YouTube videos or recordings of somebody talking for like 30 minutes to an hour, and you're receiving all of them at once. Yet you can tune into each, you can tune into a chord and pick up a bit of what that content is about. And then you realize that there's another one going on that has different content, and you're tuning into that, and you can realize that, except this was all compressed into one sort of data file, if you will. Now, when I was in meditation and realizing this was going on, I wasn't necessarily trying to ask for it. It just started coming. I don't know if I was drawing it in or if it was being pushed to me in this particular case. Hopefully it wasn't the latter. But after it happened, I kind of said, gee, I kind of know what it feels like now to be Neo in the movie Matrix. So if you've ever seen the movie Matrix, in that particular movie, the individuals in this movie have the ability to receive downloads of how to do things like how to fight karate or how to fly a helicopter by being hooked up essentially into a computer. And their consciousness, which is kind of playing out in the matrix, essentially gets a download of information very, very quickly, like within seconds, on how to do something. And therefore, when they're in the simulated matrix, then they know how to do it. So I'm not suggesting that that's what happened here, but it kind of felt like that. So you receive a mass download of data, and it was in these particular cases, they're overwhelming because it's a huge amount of data, and you really have no idea what all of it means. So when I tuned into guides, they essentially said, you're going to unprocess it over time, which makes sense. Obviously, the math equations, I'm not sure how I'm going to process that, but like the audios has been an unprocessing over time. And I would say in this particular case of the audio situation, it hit me probably about 3 or 4 months ago that I was actually downloading the future YouTube videos that I'm making now. So when I was hearing it, it sounded a lot like my voice, but obviously, I had no intention at the time that I was receiving these downloads, which were years ago, that I would ever be making a YouTube channel. But clearly, I was downloading this from the field as to something that was going to happen in the future. So this is kind of a rare case of not only was I downloading a stream of information, but it was actually moving across time as I was doing it. And my guides were right in the sense that it would be reference material when I needed it. So that's the fourth example, which I term telepathic stream. Now the fifth example is what I'm going to call telepathic tune-in or connection. And in this particular case, the download comes in the form of sort of two-way dialogue with another being. So you're not necessarily in the same physical space. So in other words, these are beings that aren't in my 3D, reality necessarily, but there's a download of information that's happening. And it could be that some of these beings are actually residing in different time-space vectors. So again, the information is in the field, and you're downloading the information and uploading information for a dialogue. Another example of what I call telepathic tune-in or connection has been when I've been able to tune into radio frequencies, which is actually how a lot of this started for me. So I'd be meditating usually early in the morning, and all of a sudden I'd start to hear different radio stations that were going on. Now that makes sense because radio waves are very much like frequency sets. So if you're tuning in, literally tuning your frequency into the same frequency, you're essentially acting as a transistor or a transmitter of that particular frequency set. Now, obviously, I'm not a speaker in the sense that, I don't have wires for me, blasting out music, but I was able to tune into that information. In one particular case, I heard just a normal station on FM. In another case, I tuned into some sort of Hispanic station. I also tuned into a couple of stations in the past that were playing important speeches by presidents at the particular time. I think one was FDR and one was JFK. So those were pretty amazing experiences, and started to help me understand that the field and the ability to tap into the field isn't just limited to our space-time, but can go across space-time vectors. So I thought it's, obviously a little bit different than the mechanics of Ascension, but if you happen to be on a journey to go through this process, and if you are watching this channel, undoubtedly you are, as you start to work on releasing different triggers and traumas within your emotional and mental body and physical body, and if your intention is set on starting to essentially work on different aspects of your multidimensional self, you could start to turn on different capabilities within your DNA. So you've got aspects of your DNA which in many humans have been dormant for a very, very long time, but have always held the codes or the keys or the potentials to allow us to do a lot more as a human species. And as I understand it, we had these capabilities a long, long time ago, but essentially they've been turned off because we've blocked the pathways within our DNA for certain energy to flow through them, for those capabilities to come through. So as you go down this path, you might start to turn on those DNA codes again for certain abilities to start to take form within your physical world that you're not used to. And these would be telepathic capabilities, or clairaudience, or clairsentience, or clairvoyance, whatever it may be for you. Different people tend to have different abilities, and sometimes they can correlate to how their physical senses actually work. So some people are better learners by hearing information. Some people are better learners by seeing information. Some people, oftentimes associate different things in their life by talking about their feelings. So they're more feeling oriented. So oftentimes your clair abilities can highly be correlated to if you're like a visual person, or an auditory person, or a feeling person, or just a mental person. I guess maybe that's correlated with claircognizance. I actually don't know about that one. So like I said, as you go down this path, you could start to turn on these DNA codes and start to have these very interesting experiences. And so, when it was happening for me, I knew enough and had done enough research to not freak out by the fact that I was starting to experience this. And I was able to control my emotional body during that period of time, so I didn't go into panic. So I thought it would be important to share this in case you start to go through this experience. But if you have gone through these experiences before and have a different experience of downloads of information, I would love to hear about it. So if you would put that into the comments section, not only can I learn about it, but others who are reading the comments might be able to learn from that experience as well, and we can all learn together. So with that, I'm going to sign off and hope that this information has provided a little bit more understanding for you on your journey through Ascension. Thanks very much, and have a great night.